Welcome everyone. This is our last video of 2020. So I hope you all have learned something or a few things over the last few months. And I hope you will stay on the lookout for our 2021 lineup. And again, if you have any topics that you're interested in learning more about, please feel free to comment below or send us an email at family@familyhouston.org. We're always looking for new suggestions. But today, we're going to be diving into a common mental health disorder called obsessive compulsive disorder, which is also known as OCD. And to join us, I have Tanya Van Dam, who is going to be answering some questions for us about this disorder, including some myths or misconceptions, symptoms, and treatments. So thank you for joining us today, Tanya.
Thank you for having me, Shelley. I'm happy to talk about OCD. It's a very interesting struggle that a lot of people have.
Okay, wonderful. Can you start off with explaining what OCD is?
So very simply, OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. So what that means is that there is an obsession, either of thoughts, urges, or images. And so as the term says, obsession is that it is persistent and it is something that a person cannot just stop thinking about at will. And so there is this obsession that is there. And the compulsion comes in as a part of how that person copes with those obsessions. And so it is often a behavior, but it can also be a mental act. So an example of a mental act is maybe someone feels that they need to pray or they need to say a certain ritual in their head to try to alleviate the distress that is caused by whatever their obsessive thought is. So this is a cycle that someone experiences over and over throughout a day or a week. And this causes them a lot of distress and may be very time consuming because they have to participate in whatever the compulsion is in order to alleviate their distress and anxiety.
Okay. Can you maybe elaborate, because I think you were kind of started to talk about them, some other symptoms that someone might experience with this?
So I think commonly a lot of people think of the person who maybe has a fear of germs and has to wash their hands compulsively, or someone who maybe counts how many times they wiggle the door handle. And so these are common OCD compulsions that a lot of people are familiar with. However, OCD is much broader than that. And so there are other categories of OCD that people may struggle with. And with those, they may have different compulsions that are in the form of checking, or like I said, maybe having to say a prayer, or walking around in a circle 3 times. It's a ritual or something that they've come up with that they believe maybe can help alleviate that distress from whatever the thought is. And typically a person who has OCD, their thought is very distressing. It is something that they are afraid of, and therefore they want to make that thought stop. And the compulsions are there for that purpose.
Okay. So I know you kind of talked about how some of the common ones that people tend to think about might be the hand washing or turning the doorknob a certain number of times. Kind of on that, are there misconceptions that a lot of people might think about when it comes to OCD?
I think the biggest misconception that comes with OCD is that if I am having this thought, it must mean something bad about me. So as I alluded to earlier, there are categories or themes for OCD. The common ones are cleanliness or cleaning, symmetry, which would have to do with like order, neatness, the number of things that there are, symmetry. But there is also taboo thoughts, which may have something to do with anything that is considered taboo. So if they think about typically taboo things, sexual assault or something of that nature, then that would be something that they would feel very uncomfortable about having those thoughts. Another category is harm. So harm OCD is one where they have thoughts about self-harm or harming someone else. And the fear is for most of these folks that if I'm having this thought, then there must be something wrong with me, or it must mean that I want this to be true. And that is not the case at all. And so that, I think, is one of the, I guess, the bigger misconception for someone who is struggling with OCD, and probably something that a lot of just general lay people would not even know that is going on in someone's head, is that they have these giant fears of the thoughts that they're having. So they will do a lot of things that seem unusual to try to cope with a thought that is very scary for them.
It seems like an incredibly tough internal struggle that is going on with those thoughts.
Yes.
Who is most prone to this disorder, or can it affect anyone?
It truly does affect everyone. There's not even a cultural bias as far as OCD is concerned, and therefore it is seen worldwide. There's a slight higher prevalence in females, but it is a very slight prevalence. The biggest differential between males and females would be that if a male is diagnosed with OCD, typically they start to see these symptoms much earlier, as early as 10 years old or younger.
Oh, wow.
So the average age of onset is around 19. So that kind of tells you like there is a very early onset for males versus females. But there's not a big difference as far as gender goes, as far as who is susceptible to developing OCD. I'll just wait. I might be getting ahead of myself.
No, you're okay. It's interesting that, just between males and females, how different this disorder can affect us. That's so interesting. Is it known what causes OCD, and is it tied to other mental disorders or illnesses?
So there's not a true cause of OCD. There are both genetic and environmental factors that do play a role. So if you have someone that is a first generation relative who struggles with OCD, you do have a higher likelihood that you might develop it as well. But there is also an environmental factor. So factors within the home, how different beliefs that are taught within the home, or how you see other people in the home respond to different fears and stressors can sometimes lead to the OCD. So there are, however, a lot of comorbidity. When I say comorbidity, that means that that is two diagnoses that interact or intersect with each other. And there is a lot of comorbidity with OCD and several of our other major mental health diagnoses. The largest one of them being an anxiety disorder. Now, anxiety disorders are a very large umbrella for several different ones, including panic attacks, social anxiety, phobias, things of that nature. But if you have any of the anxiety disorders, you are 76% higher likelihood that you will also have OCD, or I guess vice versa.
It's a huge correlation.
Yes, so those are highly comorbid. And the next one would be mood disorders, and those are primarily your bipolar and depressive disorders. Let me get the right number for you. And that one is 63% of comorbid disorders with mood disorder. However, major depressive disorder is the most common that is associated with people who have OCD, and that is 41%. So there is a pretty high comorbidity of mood disorders and anxiety disorders along with someone who has OCD. So that is not uncommon for someone to say, I have been diagnosed with both anxiety and OCD, or I have been diagnosed with major depressive disorder and OCD.
Okay.
So
Interesting. Is there anything else that you want to share with us about obsessive compulsion disorder that I didn't ask you that you think would be important for our viewers to know, or do you think we covered it all?
let me think. I think the other two things that would be just important to consider is that a lot of times when someone does struggle with OCD, that there is a lot of avoidance. However, OCD is treatable and it has a very good outlook when it is treated. But a lot of people feel like they are able to cope with it, and so therefore they don't necessarily always seek out treatment for their OCD until it becomes a little bit more severe, which is often a problem because people with OCD do have a 25% higher percentage of suicidal attempts or suicide attempts. And so it is a major struggle, a mental struggle that people do suffer from. And it's one that, although lots of people can have OCD tendencies and be completely fine, when your OCD is more moderate to severe, it does increase that likelihood of feeling very hopeless and possibly feeling suicidal. And therefore, it is always something to seek out help for, because it is treatable and it can get better. So I guess that would be just the biggest thing that I would want to touch on, is that there is that severity to it, as well as just the regular distress that comes from it. But it is very treatable, and there are a lot of people out there who get a lot of relief from it.
I think that's such a good reminder that whether you are struggling from something like OCD or if you're just having a rough time, that it's okay to get help. Like there's nothing wrong with you. Like it's a good thing to get help, and it's something that you may be getting by with it, but you're not thriving, and you should be thriving in your life. And so there are people like you, Tanya, and lots of other people who are out there and can help. So I would encourage all of you to, if you know someone struggling with this, or if you are struggling with this or just going through a tough time, I mean, it's the holidays and people are especially lonely this year, that to reach out to a professional or just someone close to you, that if you just need to get something off your chest, I would highly encourage that. So again, Tanya, thank you for talking to us tonight and explaining all of this and giving us a little more insight onto what obsessive compulsion disorder is.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to help.
All right, well, thank you all again, and we will see you in the new year with new content and new information.
Bye-bye.